$1.5 billion. That's what Anthropic just agreed to pay for training Claude on pirated books. A federal judge approved the settlement last week, the largest copyright penalty in AI history. And every major AI company did the exact same thing. OpenAI, Google, Meta, Stability. They all trained on data from the same pirate libraries. Anthropic is the first domino. It will not be the last. But here's the part that changes everything, and that almost nobody reporting on this understands correctly. The judge did not rule that AI training on copyrighted works is illegal. Read that again. The court actually found the opposite. Training an AI model on copyrighted material, the act of a machine reading and learning patterns, is protected as fair use. Anthropic isn't paying $1.5 billion because they trained Claude on books. They're paying because they stole the books first, downloaded them from illegal shadow libraries. Bibliothèque, the same pirate sites where people download movies and textbooks for free. The legal distinction is precise and devastating. How you train doesn't matter. How you got the data, that's what cost you $1.5 billion. And that distinction is about to split the entire AI industry in half. Companies that obtained their training data legally, they just won. Companies that pirated it, and most of them did, their bill is coming. Let me show you who's on which side. The settlement centers on Books 3, a dataset containing over 482,000 copyrighted books scraped from Bibliothèque, an invite-only pirate library. Novels, textbooks, nonfiction, academic works. All pirated, all illegal to possess, let alone use commercially. Think about it from the author's side. You spent 3 years writing a novel. It sells 10,000 copies. Then you discover your entire book was downloaded from a pirate site and fed into a machine that now generates text for a company worth $15 billion. You got nothing. Not a cent. Not even a notification. Anthropic used Books 3 to train Claude. The plaintiff's argument was simple. You took our work, illegally, and built a business on it. Pay us. But here's where the ruling gets interesting. The judge explicitly stated that if Anthropic had licensed those same books, or obtained them through legal channels, the training itself would be protected. Fair use. Transformative. No penalty. The act of training isn't the crime. The piracy is. $1.5 billion covers approximately 482,000 books across nearly 250,000 authors. That's roughly $3,000 per book. Not much until you multiply it across every pirated dataset in the industry. And here's why this is strategically brilliant for Anthropic. They didn't just settle a lawsuit. They established a legal precedent that says AI training is fair use. Every future model they train on properly licensed data is now legally bulletproof. The $1.5 billion wasn't just a penalty. It was the price of legal certainty. Now the question becomes simple. Who else used pirated data? And the answer is, almost everyone. Stability AI, trained on LAON 5B, a dataset containing millions of images scraped from artists without consent, already lost multiple court motions. CEO resigned. Company nearly bankrupt from legal costs alone. Estimated liability, $1 to $2 billion against a company worth maybe $300 million. They might not survive to pay. Meta used the same Books 3 dataset as Anthropic for llama training. Also used LibGen, an even larger pirate repository of academic papers and textbooks. And Meta has a problem nobody else has. They open-sourced Llama. The model trained on pirated data is now deployed by thousands of companies commercially. Plaintiffs argue Meta didn't just steal the data. They distributed the stolen goods for free. Estimated exposure, $2 to $4 billion. Google, multiple vectors. YouTube creators suing over transcript use for Gemini training. Though this is murkier since Google hosts the content. The clearer vulnerability is the Google Books corpus being repurposed for AI training beyond its original settlement scope. Google already settled the Books case in 2015 for $125 million. Plaintiffs will argue the AI use violates those original terms. Caught doing it twice. Estimated exposure, $2 to $5 billion. And then there's OpenAI, the most lawsuits of any AI company in history. They used Books 3 Same pirated dataset as Anthropic. They scraped the New York Times, which is suing for over $1 billion. The Authors Guild suit represents 17,000 writers. Total estimated exposure, $4 to $8 billion. And unlike Google or Meta, OpenAI doesn't have a profitable core business subsidizing the legal fight. They're burning $5 billion a year already. They owe more than they've ever earned. Here's why this ruling changes the economics of AI permanently, even though it technically protects training. The fair use victory means nothing if you can't prove your data is clean. And proving data provenance at scale is extraordinarily expensive. Think about what every AI company now needs. An auditable record of where every piece of training data came from. Licensing agreements for any copyrighted content. Legal teams reviewing dataset composition. Insurance against provenance claims. Before this ruling, training data was a solved problem. Scrape everything. Ask questions later. Zero marginal cost. Now, the next startup that wants to train a model, their first line item isn't GPUs. It's data provenance infrastructure. Legal review. Licensing negotiations. Easily $100 million before they write a single line of code. The irony is sharp. The ruling says training is legal. But the compliance cost of proving your training was legal is so high that it functions as an economic moat for incumbents anyway. Companies with deep pockets can afford the licensing and legal infrastructure. Startups cannot. The barrier to entry in AI just rose by $100 million, not because of a restrictive ruling, but because of an expensive proof requirement. And the companies that already settled? Their slate is clean. Their future training is legally bulletproof. The settlement cost was, in hindsight, cheap certainty. Every disruption creates winners. This one is no different. Publishers and rights holders. Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, academic publishers. They now hold leverage they haven't had in decades. Any AI company that wants legally clean text data needs licensing deals. Publishers can name their price. For the first time in 20 years, owning copyrights is a growth business again. Licensed data providers. Companies like Scale AI and Defined AI that offer properly vetted, legally sourced training corpora are suddenly critical infrastructure. Their pricing power just multiplied overnight. And here's the move nobody saw coming. Apple, the one company everyone mocked for being behind on AI. They licensed their training data from day one. Paid for it. Seemed expensive and slow at the time. Now it's a moat. While every competitor writes billion-dollar settlement checks and builds compliance departments, Apple's data lineage is clean. Being slow was the smartest move in AI. Now who's actually safe? Companies that trained on genuinely public data, government documents, Creative Commons content, properly licensed datasets, are protected by the fair use ruling. This is potentially good news for some open source projects with clean data hygiene. But the losers? Any model trained on Books 3, LibGen, LLN, or data from pirate sources. That means most of the current generation of commercial AI. And any startup that trained on those datasets and doesn't have billions to settle is now carrying undisclosed liability on their cap table. VCs are already adding data provenance clauses to term sheets. The due diligence question isn't, does your model work? Anymore. It's, can you prove where every byte of training data came from? Anthropic paid $1.5 billion. Most people read that as a loss. It wasn't. They bought three things with that money. First, a clean slate. Zero future liability. Every model they train from here forward on licensed data is legally untouchable. Second, a legal precedent establishing that AI training is fair use. That protects their entire business model forever. Third, they forced every competitor into the same compliance costs they already absorbed. The $1.5 billion was a one-time payment. Their competitors face years of uncertainty, litigation, and settlements that could dwarf what Anthropic paid. OpenAI faces $4 to $8 billion. Google faces $2 to $5. Meta faces $2 to $4. The total industry bill could exceed $20 billion within 3 years. Anthropic paid first. Anthropic paid least. And Anthropic is the only one that came out with legal certainty and a precedent that protects their future. $1.5 billion. And they got off easy. Now you know why. Subscribe for weekly analysis of AI economics. Who profits, who gets destroyed, and what the numbers actually mean. Tell me in the comments, was Anthropic's settlement a punishment or the smartest billion-dollar move in AI?